We are starting a new book of the Torah tonight. In fact, in camp Shabbat this morning with our cantorial intern Beth, we sang the 5 books of the Torah, Deuteronomy, Doot Doot song. I'll let her sing it for you. But I am always a little bit surprised when we reach Deuteronomy. It's the sign that we're deep into the summer and that, like it or not, the high holidays are starting to creep up on us. Deuteronomy is a book that retells our people's stories, hitting the major highlights and lowlights of the Israelites' time in the desert. We're being prepared for something, whether it's the coming of Tishrei in 8 weeks, or, in the case of the Israelites, to enter the Promised Land. But we're also being prepared for the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, the holiday of Tisha B'Av that begins on Wednesday night. We commemorate the destruction of the temple and a number of other tragic events that have befallen our people over the course of history. This parsha, the first one in Deuteronomy, is always read on this Shabbat, the one before Tisha B'Av. If we believe that there are no accidents in how the rabbis set up the calendar, and believe me, they thought of almost everything, then we have to ask, what about this parsha sets us up to observe Tisha B'Av? Deuteronomy has an interesting history. Most biblical scholars date this book quite late, much later than the other 4 books of the Torah. But no matter whether you think it was written later, or whether you think it was given to Moses at Sinai, or something in between, it's clear that Deuteronomy is a retrospective, a chance for Moses to look back on his history with the Israelites and all they have been through and impart some lessons. It is a book that asks us to look to the past, to remember what we have done and where we came from. And it's a book full of Moses' fear that the best days of the Israelites are behind them. Over and over, the Israelites are told that they are going to mess up, that God will punish them and even desert them. Tisha B'Av is Moses' worst fears in Deuteronomy coming true. The rabbis teach that the destruction of the temple comes about because the Jewish people are not treating each other and God well. They are treating each other with baseless hatred. They turn away from God, treat one another with contempt, and in revenge, God destroys the temple and exiles the people from Jerusalem. Eicha, the book we read on Tisha B'Av, is one of the most frightening books of the Torah. It describes all kinds of ravages of war and destruction, including mothers eating their own children, famine, enslavement, loneliness, and the fact that the Jewish people, exiled from their land, will never again find comfort or joy. 4 incredibly detailed, gruesome chapters of wrath, without so much as a glimmer of hope. But then we reach the end of the book. The final 2 verses read, "Take us back, Adonai, to yourself, and let us come back. Renew our days as of old. For truly you have rejected us, bitterly raged against us." The end. But because we are a people of hope, we won't let a book, even one as difficult as Eicha, end on a down note. Instead, when this book is read aloud in communities around the world on Wednesday night, we repeat the last verse, ending with the words, "Chadesh Yameinu kekedem," renew our days as of old. We hope. Even in the midst of our deepest despair, we look for glimmers of light and hope. We remember a time when we could feel God's presence, and we try to get back there. One could very easily read this hope as a longing for the way things used to be. After all, we are asking God to renew us as days of old. Perhaps we are longing to go back to the good old days, when things were simpler and clearer, to a time when we understood where we stood and we were sure that we could do with what God wanted. Days of old. There must be something in the past that we want to go back to. But Eicha Rabbah, the Midrash on the book of Eicha, takes this in a different direction. The word kedem appears twice in the Garden of Eden story. Once when Adam and Eve are in the garden, and a second time right after they have been exiled. Eicha Rabbah chooses the second one when trying to understand kedem, days of old. We aren't asking God to take us back to paradise, to the perfection of the Garden of Eden. Instead, what we yearn for in this moment, that Adam and Eve set out on their journey into the real world, away from God, away from God's constant protection, and a predestined future. Because what we're really asking for is a renewal of hope, a renewal of resilience, a renewal of the strength that we need to face the inevitably difficult moments of life and know that there is an opportunity for renewal waiting just around the corner. If you'll indulge me in a current pop culture moment, there's a scene in the trailer for the Barbie movie that comes out today. I promise this is relevant. Barbie is becoming unsettled because her perfect life, her Garden of Eden, seems to be crumbling around her. Her feet even get flat. You know it's trouble. She's confronted by Kate McKinnon's Barbie character offering her 2 shoes. Should have brought some props. In one hand is a perfect pink high heel, representing Barbie's perfect world. In the other, a flat brown Birkenstock. She can go back to her seemingly perfect life where everything just works, or she can go forward and, as she is told, know the truth about the real world. Barbie picks the heel, and the other Barbie, brandishing the Birkenstock, says, "You have to want to know. Do it again." You have to want to know. A perfect world, a perfect past is an illusion, and we shouldn't hold on to it. We should not try to return to it. We have to want the mess, the imperfection, the challenge, because that's how we grow. That's how we build our muscles for hope and resilience and change. And because we know that however much we might long for the past, it certainly wasn't perfect. One of my favorite midrashim is the story of Adam and Eve at the end of their lives. God brings them back to the Garden of Eden and offers that they can return there and live out their remaining days in this perfect paradise. It feels like it would be an easy yes, to return to a place where you remember that everything was taken care of and everything was as it should be. But Adam and Eve think back on their lives, on their family, on the challenges that they faced and overcame, and they reject God's offer of a return to the garden. The real world, the one that looks forward, the one that supplies so much joy and so much pain, the one that asks us to work unendingly for justice and peace and prosperity for all people, is the only world worth living in. Shabbat Shalom.